guys, we're back. Today we have a topic that I'm super passionate about. I've only begun to start researching it, but we're going to talk about storage units and storage unit facilities and how Michael Wagner here has been in the business about 8 years. And we're just going to go ahead and dive in. Thanks for coming on, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Awesome, man. So we haven't known each other very well or very long at all or anything really. I believe you reached out to me and but I think it's an awesome topic. It's something, like I said, that I'm super interested in right now, being only in single family flipping and wholesaling, is that more passive income. And based off of your videos, if you figured it out, you've only got one employee managing your 3 properties. So that's even better. I like that even better. So let's hear how Michael Wagner got into real estate and what he did before and why he chose storage units.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share a little bit of the backstory because I think it helps you understand the whole picture a little better. I am was a physical therapist by trade. Mm-hmm. I did your stereotypical do what the proverbial they say to be successful, went to school, tried to get good grades when I had my head on straight. Got several degrees and ended up becoming a doctor of physical therapy. And I enjoyed doing that. I really liked being a therapist. There was a lot of, it was very rewarding. But I also ended up kind of stuck in the middle management world and felt a little unfulfilled. Like life was good, but I just knew there had to be something else. And so that's what kind of piqued my interest about real estate. I knew that having read all the books that all of us read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich, and countless others, I knew that real estate was the way that I could escape the job and stop working for the man. So back in 2007, I bought my first duplex, and it was your typical buy, rehab, rent, and then refinance and just roll it again. And between 2007 and 2011, I did that, got up to like 31 apartments. And my quest was, just as you mentioned, trying to establish residual income that would replace my physical therapy money so that I could quit that job forever. Yeah. And I did it for several years and it worked. I mean, I was making progress, but I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes the profits on paper are a little bigger than the ones that end up in your pocket in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
So after 3 or 4 years of that, I was at 31 apartments when initially I thought I needed 100 to make my great escape. And I redid the math and it looked like I was going to need 150. And my projections for timeline were just way too long. So I realized I was actually on vacation. I'll spare you the whole epiphany story, but I was on vacation and I got fed up with the idea that my boss was dictating when my vacation was going to end. So I came home and I just went crazy trying to figure out, all right, what else is out there that can get me where I want to go faster? And that's when I stumbled on storage.
That's awesome, man. So with the 31 units, did you end up selling those and throwing them into the storage, or do you still have those?
So I don't own any of them any longer, but I stopped buying I stopped buying residential real estate several years ago. But the properties were profitable. Mm-hmm. They were just, they made up a very minor portion of our income and a very major portion of my headaches. And so from 2012, 13 on, the idea was always to liquidate them, but I wasn't in a fire sale situation. So I just did it in a way that made the most sense. And so now I'm completely free from that area. Not that there's anything wrong with rentals by any stretch. It just wasn't my strong suit per se.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that a lot because I primarily associate myself with a lot of real estate investors, and they all have pros and cons of every strategy. And some love the single family. Some want to be only in multifamily and more than, say, 20 units or something. Some are like, no rentals for me, but I'll own or finance all day. And some are like, I don't want any part to do with any of that. I want to buy notes all day. And to me, I like something in an actual physical asset in the form of real estate. And I don't want the headache of management and tenants. Aside from, hey, if you don't pay rent, I'm taking your stuff. And then the unit's mine now. So I like that idea.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the benefits of storage. And, the truth is, I'm not going to sit here and tell you storage is for everybody. I think, to your point, it depends on your strengths and weaknesses, your preferences, and ultimately your goals. What are you hoping to achieve? And storage has a lot of benefits relative to my old world of, small 2 to 4 family buildings. There are no toilets, there are no tenants. And because of that, the income to expense ratio is more favorable. The legal process when someone is delinquent is far easier in the storage world. So it's got all these benefits, but that doesn't mean that it's get rich quick mailbox money. There's still work involved. There's challenges in storage that you wouldn't see in multifamily or note investing or anything. So it's just like anything else. There's pros and cons. And I always recommend folks just get smart if they have an interest, to get smart on it and not just, hey, yeah, that's exciting, but get past the shiny object syndrome and make sure you really understand what you're getting into, and then make the decision, okay, yeah, this is or isn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's me, the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Everything sounds interesting, especially when it's related to real estate. But again, I specifically like this one for many reasons. So I wanted to ask you, and so I have virtual assistants, VAs in the Philippines that I do a lot of my back end stuff. And here recently, I've had them start going into all the major cities around DFW. I think I've got them searching about 40 cities right now for mom and pop storage units in attempts to get those leads. So that's how I'm trying to get leads right now. But I wanted to ask you, and if you don't mind sharing, how do you get your leads? Are they? I noticed the ones that I found on your site, they're pretty large, 70 plus units, or I think one of them was 170 something units. But are these mom and pops? Are brokers bringing them to you? Are you doing direct mail? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the short answer is yes.
All
Right? We're doing all of the above. So I've got currently, I own 3 storage facilities. I'm in the process of selling one of them. And then I've got 2 under contract. One is actually a student of mine who's got it under contract. I'm just a minority partner. The other one I'm under contract for myself. And so I think it'll be helpful if I just share with you how I found each of them to show you.
Yeah, love it.
Really, the sky's the limit. 2 of them were listed on LoopNet, and they were both home runs. The fact that they were there for the picking still to this day amazes me. It just goes to show you that one man's junk is another man's treasure, because these things are gold mines, and they were just sitting there listed.
Yep.
Now, that being said, self-storage is kind of a hot keyword these days. It might be trending a little bit. So those opportunities could be fewer and far between in the immediate future. So we do direct mail as well. One of my properties, this is a good lesson for everybody. I'm embarrassed to have to admit it happened to me, but I was doing direct mail, and the letter for this one facility kept coming back to me. And like a moron, I looked at it and said, oh, I better take that off my list so I don't waste 50 cents again. And I'd throw it to the side, and I'd never take it off the list, and I'd mail again. And it kept getting returned to me, of course, because there was no mailbox there. The right move would have been to follow up immediately, right? Because if I can't get a hold of them and I'm sending letters, anyone else who's trying to buy it is probably having trouble getting a hold of them. So I kind of got lucky, and I happened to be out on a long run months later, and I ran past the place, and I just said, screw it, I'm going in. And so, sweaty jogging clothes and all, I went in, talked to the lady, and she said, well, I don't own it, but I'll give you the number of the owner. And I called him, and he said, well, I don't own it either. I said, well, what the heck? She just told me you were the owner. And he said, I'm going to be the owner. I'm managing it for the owner right now, and I'm in the process of buying it. So there's me having missed my opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had gotten a little smarter since completely neglecting the lead to now I was at least going to follow through as best I could. And I just said, got to know the guy, developed some rapport. Have you ever been in storage before? He hadn't. Offered to teach him anything I could to help him as he took over. I was upfront with him. I said, you beat me to this. I wanted to buy it. Mm-hmm. And at one of our conversations, I also said, hey, if you ever decide that storage isn't for you, give me a call, whether that's the day you buy it, and maybe, who knows, maybe you can make 50, 60 grand off me overnight. I don't know what you're paying for it. I don't even know what I could offer you, but it's worth a conversation. And so I called him monthly for literally 12 months, asking if he owned it yet and seeing if he wanted to, if I could help him in any way, et cetera. Ultimately, he's like, Mike, I promise I'll call you the day I own it. And I remember the day when he called me. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he said, I lied to you. I bought it yesterday. I'm a day late, but let's go get coffee. 3 hours later, I was buying the place from him. We had a back of the napkin deal, and so that was, and it took 6 months to close. So that was an 18-month pursuit, which just goes to show you the extra effort is sometimes worth it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I've had several, not 18 months, but I've had a couple that took, 9 to 12 months to close. And you got to stay strong with it.
Yeah. And that was one, a lot of people would see that. And, as soon as they're talking to the guy who's quote unquote buying it, they would have assumed the deal was dead.
Yeah.
So the lesson's twofold. One, if your letters get returned, follow up in a different way. Even if it looks like a dead deal, don't ever throw it out. Just put it on the back burner. Keep the rod in the fire, as they say.
Yeah. I do that now with my return mail in the single family world. Is I'll probably get, 20 to 50 return mails a day right now. And I'll sift through them and find the vacant ones and the ones that were undeliverable. And then we'll go in and skip trace, and then we'll just end up calling them. And I've gotten deals that way. So
absolutely. And, a couple other ways. I bought off a storage facility off Craigslist before.
Wow.
Which is insane because they're not there very often, but it just happened to be. And so I think the key is everybody, when they ask me about, hey, where do I go to find these? My answer is always start with the listings, just so you can get practice analyzing deals. And then as you get comfortable and you're able to identify deals, then you can start looking in the other places. And people want me to give them the secret website to go look to. And there are no secret ones. That I'd list 10, and I don't mind sharing those, even though that means everybody's going to be looking at them. The real deals oftentimes come from a Google search of self-storage, small town USA, and just Google it, and you find it on some obscure website because some broker does. It's a residential agent or broker who has no experience in storage and just happens to have a brother-in-law who inherited a storage facility or something, So it really is the deep dive that's going to find you the best deals.
Yeah, that's awesome. I brought up 2 questions, but I'll ask one real quick. But you said you saved yourself 50 cents. Are you sending postcards then and not letters, or?
No, these were a very small scale campaign, and it was letters. The 50 cents was just the cost of the stamp. It didn't count the fact that I hand wrote the letters and stuffed them in an envelope myself back then.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, it saved me $1 and plus if you do it by today's numbers.
Yeah. And then you said small town USA, which made me think of markets. Are you restricted to one market? Do you want it nearby, or are you searching markets throughout the U.S.?
That's a good question. And personally, I'll tell you that I started out locally. And if you had asked me several years ago, I would say you're crazy to buy a storage facility far from your house, especially your first one. Mm-hmm. Since then, I've changed my tune only because with experience, I've been able to develop a lot of remote management systems. And so now I search nationwide. I've got 2 in New York and 1 in Florida. The ones we have under contract are in Georgia and North Carolina. So I don't think, certainly as someone new getting into storage, my advice is still going to be start locally, only because it will allow you, even if you don't buy a deal locally, you can get smart for the cheapest amount possible. If you try to get smart buying a storage facility halfway across the country, you're spending hundreds or thousands of dollars in plane tickets just to do site visits, where if you find one locally, even if it's not a deal, doing the site visit is going to get you the education you need so that you can only fly to the remote properties that have true potential, right? I've been doing this long enough now where I can, with pretty good accuracy, determine if a property has potential from my desk, and only then invest the time and money to go to see it. I also want to touch on, relative to the markets, is from a personal preference, I love small markets. That's why I said small town USA.
Yeah.
Secondary, even tertiary markets. They're really tertiary markets. Small towns, anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 people within the market. I just have no interest. My systems work really well in those markets, and I have no interest competing with Extra Space and CubeSmart and those really A-level properties.
Yeah.
People need storage everywhere, and the small markets, not only do my systems work well, but also they're ignored by a lot of investors. The sharks that would crunch me if I tried to go into downtown Manhattan to buy a storage facility, or downtown Dallas, they don't even look where I'm looking. And so it's just I found it to be a good niche.
Yeah, they want the big ones. And like you said, the A-class ones, oftentimes you probably won't even get the deals that you want to get the cash flow you want. And those tertiary markets are the ones that I'm kind of looking in. I am looking at some of the immediate bigger cities like Dallas and stuff, just in hopes of finding something tucked away in the corner that's in bad shape. But like I said, we're doing about 40 cities right now within the DFW Metroplex. I mean, some of them are as far away as an hour, but I'm picking these smaller markets, and I'm glad I decided to do that, because I guess that's what works.
Yeah, no, you're onto something there. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is a little unrelated, but it popped into my head as you were talking, is one of the questions I often get is, well, storage is so hot right now. It's a seller's market. As an investor, how can you make money? And what I always remind people is, and this fits with, as you're looking for deals, someone might say, oh, Texas is way oversaturated. They've got 18 or 20 square foot per person, and the national average for storage is 7 to 8 square feet. You'd be an idiot to buy in Texas right now. But that logic is so incredibly flawed, I can't even describe it. Storage is, beyond, more so than any other real estate, a micro market industry. Yep. So you might have Dallas oversaturated, but that doesn't mean that this little 2-mile radius on the outskirts of the city might be entirely undersaturated. And geographically, people aren't going to drive past one storage facility to get to another one of equal, all other things being equal. So if you can find those strategic locations and pop it in, you can go into a quote unquote oversaturated macro market and do very well. And so what I caution people getting into this is just don't let the industry averages or the national trends dictate you. We're in a seller's market, and I just bought a storage facility in Florida for $19 a square foot. To give you a point of comparison, building would cost $30 to $35 a square foot plus the cost of land. Yep. So it's a hot market, and I bought for 50 cents on the dollar.
That's awesome.
Yeah. There's opportunities everywhere. You just got to be willing to look deep for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that a lot in single family, almost daily. If I don't see on Facebook, somebody saying, hey man, how are you still finding deals? It's just, if you have the mindset that something is not available because of what you're seeing on social media or what people are telling you, then it probably isn't going to work out too well for you. You've got to have an opportunist mindset about anything you endeavor, especially in real estate, because like you said, storage units is a hot topic right now. But if you think about the 72-year-old guy retiring from real estate and wants to start unloading things, more than likely he's not on Facebook hearing what everybody's talking about. He doesn't know it's a hot topic and that everybody's selling right now. So exactly. You just never know. All right. So we've talked about how you find them. And we touched a little bit before the actual interview about financing, but it's a multitude of everything from what you said. So are you getting any owner finance out of these, or are you just raising money and bank money?
Both. And I'd like to start the answer to your question by saying there's tons of conventional money out there. Lenders are very hungry for storage assets. The reason being they default less often than any other real estate product on the planet. Literally, I'm more likely to default if I had one on the mortgage on my house than I am on a storage facility, which is, there's no other commercial real estate that could say that. They default less than 8% of the time, and banks are finally seeing that. And so you can get 90% LTVs on a strong, stabilized storage property. I run into trouble because I don't want the strong, stabilized storage property. I want the 40, 50, 60% full property that I can increase occupancy and double the value over 12 to 36 months. And so banks aren't quite as excited to lend on those, especially if it's your first deal. Now that I've got a bit of a track record, I can get the banks to play ball even on some of those. They usually have to be pretty close to break even. They can't be hemorrhaging cash, although the first one I bought was. And the way we compensate for that is doing a combination of conventional financing. If we can't get the highest LTVs, we'll add in either my own contribution or some private money. To give you a quick rundown on all the various ways, my first property I bought it was $330 we paid for it, plus 20 in closing costs. So looking at $350,000, I put in 40 of my own that I scraped together from equity in my rental portfolio. I borrowed 60 privately, kind of off the record, and then borrowed $250 from a conventional loan using the SBA guaranteed product.
So being creative, it's one of those things you got to be in real estate creative.
Absolutely. And since then, I've brought in my second property. I gave away 19% equity in exchange for the 20% down payment on the property. And so I had a conventional loan and then gave up the equity for the down payment. I was supposed to be just very minimally the good faith deposit out of pocket. We had some overage repairs. So that one I was all in $26,000. It was a $400,000 project. And then the most recent one we closed in Florida, I was $5,000 out of pocket, and we raised $495 privately through a combination of splitting up some equity. I'm a 76.5% owner, and the other funds came through a fixed interest rate, basically private money at 12%.
That's awesome.
Very short term. So the lessons there are, one, the sky's the limit, and two, though a lot of times when people are transitioning from residential, and myself included, into this realm, it's like, wow, there's a barrier to entry there. That's a bunch of change. I don't have $100,000 laying around for a down payment. If you can get creative, you don't need it. Certainly, it makes things a little easier, especially on the first deal, because you don't have the experience to lean on. But the one we're buying in North Carolina right now is $35,000 down, the rest seller financing.
Wow.
And so, and that's a small property. It's only 12,000 square feet. It needs a good bit of work. You wouldn't believe the pictures if I showed them to you. It's straight out of zombie apocalypse.
That's good. That's the best ones, though.
Absolutely. It's 100% at the historic facility in the middle of the woods. I'm not even kidding you.
It could be a good bug out location. You just keep it on the DL,
right?
And just hide all your food storage and weapons there.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome, because that's one of the reasons I'm reaching out. And as we're speaking, I'm like, man, I should start looking at like sub $1 million properties that are LLC owned. But I've been looking at mom and pop. I think I went to 750 and lower tax assessed values, but is to get the owner financing. That's why I'm looking for the mom and pop, and they're just a little bit easier to track down because we're skip tracing them. I'm gonna start cold calling them. But the owner finance, for me specifically, since I've only been in business about a year and a half, and so banks aren't too enthusiastic to lend to me right now. So I think I was going to go more on owner financing, but I think we pretty much touched on everything. But and then I've asked you about your markets. You're all over. It looks like East Coast. Is that for a reason, or just happens to be where the opportunities are at?
That's just how it played out. I started locally. I'm up in Western New York. So when I say New York, people think skyscrapers, but we've got more cows where we are than anything. And so I started here locally, and then I moved into Florida and North Carolina and Georgia just because that's where the deals are. I'm looking nationwide. When people start looking, what I tell them is, one, start locally so you can get smart. But two, I'm very big on making sure that my businesses serve my life as opposed to the opposite way around. So in order to achieve that and to help other people achieve it, what I advise people to do is, don't just start looking nationwide, because you're not to the point where you can source that many deals, right? You got to get smart first. And so you prioritize where you look. You start locally within an hour of your house, then maybe go to 2 hours. Once you're to 2 hours, assuming you're pretty close to an airport, you could fly within the same time zone and the same time you can drive to and from, right? So then you start looking, where can you fly to directly from your city, from your airport, right? And looking within an hour of those cities that you can get to with an hour or two flight. Just making things streamlined so that you're not, I'm not excited to buy a property in California. It doesn't mean I wouldn't, but I can't go to California with the 5-hour flight and a 3-hour time delay and get back here later that night or the next morning, minimizing time away from my kids.
Yeah.
And I go to California once every 3 or 4 years on vacation. I go to Florida 3 times a year because I have young kids, so we're at Disney World. Mm-hmm. So buying a storage facility an hour from Disney World, where I spend 20 to 25 days a year, has a whole lot less disruption to my life than if I were to buy it somewhere where I don't go. So my advice is, if you go someplace 3, 4, 6 times a year, look there next. If your local market has nothing, do you have in-laws in Oklahoma where your wife makes you go or girlfriend makes you go every quarter? Then buy there. 1, you're there anyways. And 2, you've got boots on the ground, which is one of my kind of 3-prong remote management system, is that boots on the ground. You need someone to respond to emergencies, and you either know the people or you know people who know people, right? As opposed to going to an area where you have 0 connections.
Right.
So, it's more or less common sense, but I think it's something that people overlook, especially when they're looking at a new market or a new product, a new shiny object. They're so excited about storage, they forget that, oh yeah, it would be tough to get to California and back.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. Because I'm thinking like, okay, my brother just moved to Salt Lake, so I need to start looking out there. I've got buddies all over Phoenix, so I need to look out there. So
there you go.
No, and you touched on being in and out of a location within the same day or within the following morning. So what types of things are you looking at on these site visits?
That's a good question. And it's an art and a science. I'll talk about the one I just went to in North Carolina. I flew down this past Tuesday, I guess. It's that recently. And essentially, I've done a primary or a preliminary analysis from my computer where I'm looking at the financials of the property. In this case, it's empty, so that didn't take very long. But then I'm looking at the market. So I want to see income and expenses of the property. I want to see the market so that I can assess supply and demand and the competition. And then I want to look at it's hard to do remotely, but the full potential of the property. So it's kind of as is, then get a feel for the market at whole, and then what could this property be if I fixed it? Really, all you're trying to do is answer the question, what's wrong with it, and do I have the power to fix it?
Yeah.
And if I have the power to fix it, what's it worth once I fix it? And those are the 3 questions that guide everything I do. If my preliminary analysis at the computer shows me, hey, this is a potential, it's worth spending $1,000, fly down there. And then I'm going to the facility, and people always think I'm nuts when I say this. My wife, it drives her nuts because this is not how she operates. But I tell her, I'm going to fly down there, I'm going to spend $1,000 and fly down there. 6 hours later, I'm going to get at the facility, and 90% of my decision will be made in the first minute that I see the property. Mm-hmm. I kind of tap into my intuition, and I just get a feel, and it's either a pit in my stomach that goes, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Or hey, now what's this?
Yeah.
And then, if I get the, hey, this looks like it's got potential, my entire site visit is spent trying to ruin the deal. That's my goal, is I want to turn over every rock and go, okay, what will ruin this? And, it's different for every deal, but I'm going to look and see that, hey, if they're saying it's 50% occupied, are 50% of the units locked with stuff in them? If they say, if the broker told me XYZ about the competition, I'm going to go to all that competition. I'm going to call the competition, which I can do from home, but then I'll visit them directly. I want to, one, gauge how they're doing within the market itself, and then also gauge whether or not I can be better than them.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in getting in price wars if I don't have to. That's part of my analysis. What I'm going to look at is, okay, here's what the market rates are. Worst case scenario, if I had to get into a price war, would I win? Right? And there's a lot of things that go into that. But I'm looking where are we located strategically to the competition? Are they right in downtown where all the people are and I'm on the outskirts? In that case, I got to compete on price to some regard, right? It's price and marketing are the only things that are going to win that battle.
Yep.
And that's essentially what we're looking at. We're frontage, visibility, all of those things. How much work physically is going to be needed at the property. This one in North Carolina is going to need about $70,000 worth of clearing and gravel and fencing and all that stuff, which is a lot. Most of my facilities, my overhaul is a managerial and an operational one because it's not that, they're metal buildings. They don't need to be all that pretty.
Yeah.
Especially in these tertiary markets. But you do need to be attentive to the customers. You do need to fill the need that they have, solve their problem when they have it, be attentive on the telephone, all of those things. So that's usually my overhaul. Our Florida facility is a $500,000 project, and I only had a $15,000 renovation budget. Everything else was just managerial.
That's cheaper than my single family stuff.
Right?
That's awesome.
And $5,000 of that did go on to the double wide on site. Only 10,000 went into the storage itself.
Oh, that brings up another thing. I didn't write it down, but unit or properties that I would be interested in is ones that have the physical structures themselves, and then also maybe an acre on the backside where you can park RVs and boats. Are you getting into that at all or thinking about it?
We do some of that. Our first storage facility that we bought had a very large boat and RV component to it.
Mm-hmm.
From a numbers standpoint, that's great because very little investment. You're $4 or $5 a square foot to build a gravel parking lot and then add in a fence, and that's all you have to do to start renting it out, and you get decent revenue.
Yeah.
That being said, anytime storage demand is sufficient, you will, from a number standpoint, decide to cannibalize the outdoor storage and replace it with buildings.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what I did at my second facility locally. It was it was 2 acres of land. 1 acre was grass, 1 acre was buildings, 50% full. So when I bought it, my goal was to get the existing buildings full. And as soon as I bought it, I also turned that acre of grass into an acre parking lot and got approvals for 45 boats and RVs to be parked.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time went by and very quickly, actually one per year, I'd add a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot building to replace one row of boats or RVs until the point where I had cannibalized it all because demand was there for it.
Yeah.
But it's a great revenue stream for the interim, for sure. And in some markets, it's a great permanent revenue stream.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I mean, like I'm way out in the country, kind of. I mean, the country is within walking distance where it's out in the county. But so like, where I live, you've got a lot of HOAs and stuff. And so you can't have the boats and the cars and stuff. So that's what makes me think about here locally with so many HOAs in the Dallas area that the gravel parking lots would be ideal. But you make a great point is eventually taking that over with physical structures if the numbers make sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. One of the other cool things that intrigued me about storage units is the very little management. And a lot of them have an on-site 24-hour live on-site property manager. But I've also seen a lot of them go into technology-based where you got the pad right at the front gate and it's self-access, self-billing, all that stuff.
Yep.
Which ones are you using or both or plan to?
Yeah, I am. I started my first facility to give you a little background. When I quit my physical therapy job, I gave up a pretty decent income and bought the facility that was losing $2,000 a month with the financing that we had in place. So,
wow.
Being married, I had no choice but to go there every freaking day, right?
Yeah.
You get permission from your wife to quit your job and then not go to the place that's losing $2,000 every day. It's just not going to be allowed.
Right.
So that's what I did. And I thought that's what was necessary. I went there 6 hours, 5 days a week. And, I was working to get the place. I was new. So I thought I was staying busy, but I was staying busy spending money I didn't need to spend and learning a lot. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But eventually I realized, okay, I don't need to be here. I can hire someone. She needs to be here about half as long as I have been here because I was twiddling my thumbs for half the time. So I hired an employee for 16 hours a week. And had you asked me then, I would have said, well, that's the minimum needed.
Yeah.
Until fast forward a little bit, and I decided to build my own house, physically build my own house. So 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, I was swinging a hammer, and my manager broke her ankle and had surgery and was out for 9 months.
Oof.
I didn't have the option to drop everything and fill in for her role. So I managed everything remotely from my telephone in a very archaic, like emailing people scanned paperwork and signing, and it was a train wreck, but it worked, and we hit revenue records during that time. So I kind of hit a light bulb, and I was like, well, I don't need 16 hours a week either. She still works there that amount of time because she has other benefits, and now she lives on site, which she didn't initially. But what I realized was, if I put together a decent system, I don't need any employees. And so I've since implemented that at 2 storage facilities. And it's basically made up of an online portal where people can find and rent the units, as well as set up auto pay. And it's all streamlined where they do all that. And then they get an email and a text message with a gate code that tells them how to get past our security, where their unit is, reminds them to bring their own lock because we're not there to sell them one, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then I've got a call center is the second part of it. They're specific to the storage industry, and they're in-house to my management software. So it's not like they are answering calls for the lawnmower, the plumber, and storage and getting that level of service. The customers often don't know that they're not speaking to the owner or an in-house employee.
Yeah.
And then the third part is the remote, the boots on the ground that we touched on before to handle the emergencies. And those 3 pieces have created a system where on my 3 facilities right now, I'm 5 to 10 hours in of hands-on whatever, whether it's forwarding leads from an aggregator website to my call center, or dealing with questions that the call center can't handle, doing the books, accounting, those types of things. But 5 to 10 hours a week on 80,000 square feet of storage, almost 600 units in 2 different states.
The lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, a big part of my business is those systems. I learned that real quick because I've been flipping since last April. And my very first house, I swung the hammer every single day. Me and my girlfriend and my kids, we'd be over there 7 days a week. I mean, hours upon hours upon hours. And then as I was working on that one, spending every dollar I had, I contracted another house and partnered with my lender at the time. And he did all the managing of the contractors. He spent all the money. He did all that. And I was like, holy crap, that was so easy. And then I have a bunch of buddies that were doing the virtual assistants. And I was like, that sounds cool. But I mean, that seems like a lot of work to train them and all this stuff. And now that I have 5 VAs, I'm like, man, what was I doing before? Right. I was staying up till 2 a.m. for nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's been my biggest thing, is trying to work myself out of the company to an extent. With single family, I have to be a lot more hands-on, at least I feel at the moment, which is another reason why I want to get in the storage units. But yeah, outsourcing and systems, and then the boots on the ground. What's your boots on the ground? Are they just responding to mechanical failures, or?
Yeah, there's there's not often, there's not a whole lot they need to do. There's a couple routine tasks that need to happen either weekly or bi-weekly. Mm-hmm. And the boots on the ground, it started at some of my locations literally as the guy who mows my lawn.
Yeah.
Property management company that mows lawn at commercial properties, including, big franchises and that sort of thing. I said, hey, listen, you might not be into this, but if you're going to be here every 10 days mowing the lawn, I give you an extra X number of dollars, have your guy walk around. Here's the sheet he'll need to fill out. And he just basically does a lock audit, tells me what units are empty, what are locked. If they're empty, are they clean? And if they're not clean, he either cleans them, sweeps them, or if there's junk in them, he'll compile all the junk into one quote unquote garbage unit that I can handle when I'm down there once every quarter or whatever.
Yeah.
Or just call a got junk company and have them go empty it from afar. So there's those routine tasks. And then there's also, hey, Mrs. Smith is 90 years old and isn't comfortable renting online or over the phone. She wants to see the unit. Can you show it to her?
Yeah.
And, do that sort of thing. I lost my keys. I need you to cut the lock. All that type of stuff. And so at my Florida location, I found an awesome gentleman. He lives in the double wide with his wife. So now it's 24/7 surveillance that I have.
Nice.
Instead of getting $850 a month on the double wide, I get $250 a month. And that $600 discount is just buys me a whole lot of free phone calls and free tasks. And it's basically a credit each month toward doing whatever I ask him to do. And when we worked through the agreement, I said, I can only do this if you're willing to meet my need. And my need here is that you treat this place like it's your own, and I can forget that it exists for the most part.
Right.
And he's been phenomenal at filling that role so far. I got very lucky in that instance. It was sometimes you have to go through 3 or 4 folks, and that can be a headache. But when you get to the right one, it's a godsend.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar situation. I owned a carpet cleaning franchise in Flagstaff, Arizona. Yeah. And when I left Flagstaff, with it being a franchise, I had to leave it there because it was county. It was
territory
county origin. Yeah. So I hired a guy. He didn't care. He quit without telling me. Had to go out there, retrain a guy. And ever since then, he's been doing great. And so much so that about a month and a half ago, I basically gave him the company. I was like, hey, man, you saved me from a lot of headache. I'm not really making a whole lot of money being here in Texas anyways. Take over my headache, please, and I'll pay the transfer fees. And so finding that guy really changed everything for me and alleviated years of headaches. And now the company's gone, so I'm a little more thankful for that. But the right people make the world's a difference.
Absolutely.
It really does. There's one more unit or storage unit topic I wanted to touch on. We did a little bit about technology, but I wanted to ask you about the actual on-site technology. Do you prefer the temperature controlled units, or does it matter?
That's for a personal preference. I tend to stay away from them, but I think that's more a reflection of my past. I exited residential real estate because storage is a lot simpler.
Yep.
And so I didn't want to repair toilets or HVAC, furnaces, sinks, anything. So that's where the appeal of a metal building on concrete with a fence around it came from me.
Of course.
And then when I learned that the revenue per square foot is almost the same as apartments and the expenses are considerably less, it just made a whole lot of sense. Now, that being said, I did convert a small portion of one of my properties, a front office building. I converted those to climate control because I rather have climate control than tenants. And, we're in the Northeast, so the demand is less. If you go down south, this industry as a whole is trending toward more sophistication. So I think climate controlled is definitely something to consider. And if the deal presented itself and it was half climate control or all climate control, I would certainly look at it the same way I would a regular one. But thus far, and my instinct, I'm a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. So I like the concrete and metal buildings, and I don't want furnaces or air conditioning or any of that if I can stay away from it.
Yeah, you don't want the call from management that the AC is down while you're on vacation in Florida.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, we don't need that stressors.
Exactly.
All right, enough about storage units for now. I'll probably ask you a bunch more questions offline just because it's so intriguing to me right now. But
Right on.
you're raising money for cerebral palsy, and raising money for charitable reasons is something I'm super passionate about. So give us a little snippet of what you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe strongly that everything I have is not because of me. I've been given it, and am required to use it responsibly and spread as much good as I can with the blessings that I have in my life. And so I also try to be a good steward of all of those resources, whether it's time, money, expertise. And one of the causes that's very near and dear to my heart is cerebral palsy. I have some great friends whose first daughter was born about 6 years ago or so with cerebral palsy. And watching her, I mean, she's an animal, dude. She's been on stage in front of the research divisions of Microsoft and Facebook using a eye gaze computer to communicate. She's like years ahead intellectually, but from a physical standpoint, she struggles a lot, and so that masks a lot of her genius.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so cool to support a company or an organization, I should say, that's enabling us to see how incredibly smart she is, right? And that's my personal experience. Clearly, the organization helps anyone affected by cerebral palsy. It's the Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, and they have an annual fundraiser. It's called September. So for the month of September, anyone who signs up pledges to take 10,000 steps a day and raise money and awareness for the cause, and they use it to research. They fund research at some of the top universities and organizations throughout the country to find better treatment options and a cure for cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
And so what I've decided to do, I'm a little crazy. Anyone who knows me well enough knows that taking 10,000 steps a day is it nothing to sneeze at, but it's also not a huge challenge. So what I've added in is I'm going to start an extended fast where I don't eat and I continue not eating based on how much money I'm able to raise between now and then. Essentially, for every $100 I can raise for this cause, I'm going to pledge to not eat for an hour. The idea, if I can raise $10,000, I won't eat for 100 hours. It'll just be a water and coffee. You're not getting my coffee.
Yeah.
I'll stop eating, but I'm not getting rid of my coffee.
Right.
And so, that's just a little ploy. One, to help raise awareness and maybe spread the word a little bit more than I would if I didn't include that component. But I'm also very big on vision stacking. Fasting is a part of my life. I am well aware of the health benefits associated with intermittent fasting and occasional extended fasting. So I see this as a way to kill two birds with one stone. I raise money for a great cause, and I'm incentivized to push myself maybe a little farther than if I didn't tie these two things together.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I mean, not only is it a great foundation to raise awareness for, but fasting is extremely beneficial to your health with cleansing the body and the mind. Really, it could be taxing on your mind. I've done that I haven't done it in probably the past month. I've been traveling a lot, but I went 4 months straight with intermittent fasting of 16-hour breaks.
Okay.
And so I'm well aware of the struggles of it, and also obviously the health benefits of it.
It's cool. And I'm a big believer that everything's impossible until you decide it's not. So there was a point when 16 hours of fasting wasn't possible to me. And then I decided it wasn't. So I did it. And then 24, and then 36, and then 72 hours. And
wow.
All of these things that it's so beneficial from a health standpoint, but also psychologically, to kind of highlight the simple truth that we are our biggest enemies when it comes to achievement. Our limiting beliefs we think are true simply aren't. And if we decide that they're not, and then take the proper actions to overcome those false barriers, what we can achieve is truly, we can't even start to imagine what's possible until we start ripping those barriers down. And that's kind of the fasting is just a symbolic commitment to that, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It has a lot to do with my sign, or my favorite saying is, fear is a manipulative emotion that tricks us into leading a mediocre life. And a lot of the fear of the unknowns and the fear of becoming too hungry. I mean, there's so many people in this world that don't have any food for those days forcefully. And so us being able to control that with just a little mind, controlling of our own emotions and mind it should just show us powerful.
Absolutely. And it's, there's a saying that a luxury once obtained becomes a necessity.
Yeah.
So if you ask anybody in America, they say, oh, you need to eat every day. Well, to your point, it wasn't that long ago when people didn't have food available 24/7 and they survived. So it's not a true need. It's a luxury, but once we obtained it as a society, it became a need.
Yeah.
And I think it's very beneficial for us to remind ourselves. I do that through actually fasting, to kind of have a tangible demonstration of, oh yeah, I don't need it. And, and it extends to all other parts of your life where we have all these awesome things that are luxuries, and they can turn into necessities if we don't keep it in check.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's okay. So I normally ask everybody 2 questions, and one of them, we'll go into the freedom question first. Now, I've never asked this before, but I think I'm going to go ahead and ask you because not only the webpage that I was viewing with all your videos, but our conversation here about obtaining that freedom. And of course, my podcast is called The Fearless Pursuit of Freedom. So what does freedom mean to you? I guess on all fronts: family, life, money, all that stuff.
Sure. And, that's of course, a huge question and tough to unpack in such a short segment, but I'll try to. And for me, I think it's different for everybody. And I always want to point out that my definition of success is different than anybody else's. And the most important piece of advice I can ever give anybody is make sure you're chasing your definition of success rather than somebody else's.
Yeah.
I don't know that the audience necessarily cares about fun to me, right? A preschool graduation is not fun for anybody who doesn't have a 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But the real, for me, success is being in control of my time and having the freedom to spend my time and money in a way that reflects my true core values, not the values that society says I should have, the Ferrari or Lamborghini, though that would be really nice and maybe someday. I've got a whole lot of other priorities I want to check off before that happens. And the greatest freedom that I've experienced through this storage thing, I thought it was going to be, hey, make so much money I don't have to worry about paying my bills. And that happened, which was incredible. But the greatest blessing has been, now I get to spend my time raising money for charity, meditating, working on my health, all of these other things. Basically, I spend my time chasing a well-defined and written definition of success. And I have gauges in each area. I've been married for 10 years, and my wife and I still date. We didn't always, until I got into storage, had a whole bunch of free time and realized, man, you don't have to stop dating once you get married. Let's get back to that, right?
Right.
I take my kids on dates, and I keep track. I gauge it just like I gauge my finances. I calculate my net worth. I calculate the number of dates I take my family on every month, and really making sure that I'm not neglecting certain areas of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's pretty similar to mine is we touched on a little bit ago about not only the benefits of being able to spend more time with our family, but is the impact that we can provide on this world. And literally the whole world is, my core mission is to give back as much as I can. And I just had a recent trip to Peru that really put my my why into perspective. But I think your freedom is very similar to mine, and it's not. It is very financially driven, but I think that is not only to have all the pretty things in life, but it allows you to do the things that we want, like spending time with our family, going on vacation, not worrying about, like you said earlier, your boss telling you when you have to come back from Disney World or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, we have a lot in common when it comes to the freedom topic, which again is why I named the podcast this.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And to more succinctly answer your question, and what you just said kind of touched on it for me, are a couple things. One, talking about vacation, we travel, and you notice I call it travel instead of vacation, and that's very conscious.
Yeah.
Because I know vacation comes from the word vacate, which means you're vacating your life, whereas travel doesn't have that sense to it. It's a part of my life. So we travel 60 to 90 days a year. We're probably going to eclipse 90 this year because of the freedom that storage has given us. And it's that freedom to do what we want to do when we want to do it, and not have someone else dictate how we spend our time, that I really find most beneficial and most rewarding. And it's what gets me out of bed in the morning. But I will tell you, I knew that I was successful when days of the week stopped having a feeling.
Yeah.
Right? Ask anybody with a 9 to 5 what Monday feels like, and they can describe it a whole lot differently than Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Wednesdays when relief starts to set in.
Yeah.
The light at the end of the tunnel. And I remember starkly the day that I go, none of them feel any different anymore. Like weekends, weekdays, it means nothing because I'm not constrained by society anymore.
Yeah.
At risk of sharing too much, that's why I had to ask you if we were going to be on video today, so I knew if I needed to shower, right?
Right. No.
That's freedom to me, man.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oftentimes I lose track of what day it is. And the only time I ever know is because my emails blow up Monday morning. Like
Yep.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the emails start to die out. And then Monday, boom, I'm like, oh, I guess it's Monday again.
People are back at it.
Yeah, everybody starts to work. And but that's awesome. I mean, I'm not there yet, but that's why I'm trying to achieve this, so I can just forget what day it is. But we're coming up on an hour here. I don't want to keep you too long. I asked you one question I haven't asked before, and then you kind of touched on exotics. So I know you like Lamborghinis and Ferraris, which is one of the questions I typically ask, but we'll just go to the last one is if you only had 6 months to live, what do you think you would do with that?
That's an incredibly astute question. And I'll tell you, that is, you talked a bit about your calling. And mine, part of it involves helping other people, but myself being the first person, because I don't believe I can teach it until I've lived it, is I want the way I spend my life today to approximate what it would be like if I only had 6 months to live, right? Because I truly believe that, no one's going to argue with me that none of us know how long we have left, right?
Yep.
And if you are living in true accordance with your values and your principles, and you're spending your time and money in a way that's reflective of those things, and you got that terrible news that you only had 6 months to live, your life would not change all that much.
Yep.
We only think in our head, oh my goodness, I would live so differently if I only had 6 months to live. That's a tragedy, because you may already only have 6 months to live and you don't know it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I try to do is help people. And that's my goal every day when I wake up, is to, and none of us are going to be perfect at it. And I'm sure there's things that you can't begin to comprehend until you get that news. So of course, some things are going to change, but the big parts, I know that I'm successful if it ever comes that I get that news and I don't have to change a whole lot, I know I'm living right. And that's what I try to do every day. Yeah,
that's why I asked this question, is to really make people think. Is primarily, 100%, I've interviewed very successful people. But when I get to this question, it's almost always the same thing as, spending time with family and friends and impacting the world. But the idea behind it is to get people to think, am I doing that now? Because with everybody texting on the road, it could be tomorrow, the next day, that we get smashed by somebody texting on the phone, or whatever kind of medical condition. I mean, anything is it's a short life. It's a life that we need to value, and don't forget that life is so valuable and can be cut short anytime.
Right.
But you also talked about the impact, and I would be done right now, but I forgot to mention Storage Rebellion. So I figured that would be a place that viewers or listeners could go and contact you. But tell me a little bit about Storage Rebellion before we cut you off here.
Yeah, if folks want to learn a little more, they can head over to Facebook and go to @Storage Rebellion. I post videos there, several times a week. Palsy. There'll be a video about the cerebral palsy research. If people are so inclined, they can donate there. One of the things I'm doing is offering a free storage consultation, telephone call, in exchange for a donation of any amount. I'm not going to put a value on that time for anybody. If they have it in their heart to make a donation, I am more than happy to get on the phone and teach as much as I can in a phone call about storage, and help them get started. There's also a lot of videos on there that are storage specific. They can poke around, and if they want to go even deeper than that, my website, thestoragerebellion.com, has a couple case studies and a webinar that people can dig into, and then reach out to me through that site if they want to go any deeper. And, really what I've started there is just I'm trying to build a community of people who are interested in self-storage beyond the shiny object stage. I'm happy to help people figure out if it's a shiny object or not. And then for those that are really committed, there's an opportunity to work together, partner, go through a training program, partner on a deal. And my goal is not to help people get rich in storage. My goal is to help people use storage to change their life. So it's a values-based and an integrity-based training program. But for anyone who's interested, I'm happy to talk more about it.
Yeah, awesome. So webpage and Facebook, the Storage Rebellion Facebook. And of course, I assume they can reach out to your personal page if they have any questions beyond what we've covered here.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Michael.
Absolutely.
Learned a lot. I have a million more questions. I'll ask you as time goes on, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and seeing the vision that you had to impact not only your family's life, but the world as we know it. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.